It was supposed to be a quiet morning, the kind where the sunlight slides through the curtains and warms the floor just right. I'd just finished folding a tiny blanket, soft, pale blue, with little white clouds stitched along the edges, when the pain came. Sharp, sudden, off. At first, I told myself it was normal, just the baby shifting. But deep down, I think I already knew something was wrong. Something irreversible. Hours later, in that sterile emergency room, under buzzing fluorescent lights, my entire world shifted in a way I couldn't put into words. I remember the nurse's face before anything else. Too calm, too prepared, and Daniel's hand in mine. It was just there. Limp. Not holding, not reassuring. No one said it right away, but when they did, it was like the air was sucked out of the room. 7 months. 7 months of choosing names, imagining little feet, whispering stories to my belly, gone in an instant. There's no heartbeat. That was all it took. I didn't cry. I just stared, waiting maybe for someone to tell me they'd made a mistake. The funeral was quiet. Just family, a few friends, a tiny white casket that looked more like a jewelry box than something meant for goodbye. I sat through it all like I was watching someone else's life, nodding, thanking people for coming, pretending I heard their words, when all I could hear was the silence that had replaced a heartbeat. I thought Daniel would hold me after, that we'd cry together, maybe sleep in the nursery just to feel closer to what we'd lost. But he barely looked at me. He didn't cry, he didn't even stay. 3 days later, he was gone. Left a note on the kitchen counter beside the prenatal vitamins. Said he couldn't handle all the sadness. As if I could. As if grief were a faucet you could turn off and walk away from. The house still smelled like baby powder. Her clothes were still folded. The mobile above the crib still spun when the breeze crept in through the window. And I stood in the middle of it all, not just grieving the baby I never got to hold, but realizing the man who promised forever only meant as long as it was easy. I kept hearing people say things like, "You're strong," or "Time heals." But what they didn't understand was that time had stopped for me. The world outside kept moving, cars passing, leaves falling, people laughing in cafes. But inside that house, I was frozen. Every room whispered what could have been. Every drawer held something she would never wear. And me? I wandered from room to room like a ghost in my own life, trying to remember how to breathe without breaking. There were nights I'd wake up reaching for him, still expecting to find warmth beside me. But the bed was always cold, always too big. I started talking to her sometimes, my daughter, saying her name just to keep it alive in the air. And when I looked at myself in the mirror, I didn't see me. I saw a woman hollowed out by grief, a shell. I had lost more than a child. I had lost the man who swore to hold me through anything. After he left, the days bled into each other. I stopped setting alarms, stopped opening curtains. The sun rose and fell without me noticing. I quit my job, sent a 2-line email, no explanation. My phone buzzed with messages I didn't read, voicemails I couldn't bring myself to hear. Friends tried. God, they tried. But every invitation felt like a reminder that life was still happening, just not for me. It was like the world had packed up and moved on, and I hadn't been invited. I stopped cooking. Lived off cereal and coffee, if I remembered to eat at all. Some nights I'd sit in the nursery for hours, knees pulled to my chest, letting the silence press in like a second skin. I didn't cry much, not the way people expect. My grief was quieter, heavier, like wearing wet clothes that never dry. Some days I didn't move from the couch, just stared at the TV, not really watching, not really present. Time was something that happened to other people. There was this one day, I couldn't tell you which, where I realized I hadn't spoken out loud in over 24 hours. Not a word, not even to myself. It was like my voice had packed up too, decided there was nothing left worth saying. I'd go to the grocery store and wander the aisles with an empty basket, staring at jars I didn't need, walking past baby food with my breath caught in my throat. Every mother I passed felt like a wound, every stroller, a trigger. Then it happened. A photo popped up on my screen, suggested by some cruel algorithm. Daniel, smiling. His arm around another woman, tan and glowing and carefree. They looked happy, like nothing had ever touched them, like he had never stood beside me in a hospital room and promised we'd get through this. My heart didn't just break, it shifted. Something sharp and quiet clicked into place inside me. Not rage, not yet. Just this still, frozen understanding. He survived us. I wasn't supposed to. I stared at that photo for what felt like hours, zoomed in on his eyes, tried to recognize the man I once loved, but all I saw was absence. The kind that starts slow, then swallows everything. I thought of the mornings he used to kiss my forehead before leaving for work, of the names we had picked out together, and how easily he replaced it all. That woman in the photo didn't steal him. He gave himself away, willingly, effortlessly. And in that moment, something in me cracked, but didn't shatter. Instead, it calcified, hardened, like my body was building scar tissue around a wound no one could see. I stopped checking my phone, stopped waiting for a knock at the door. If the world had moved on without me, then fine. I'd learned to walk through it on my own. I wasn't sure who I was becoming, but I knew one thing. I could no longer be the version of me who waited to be saved. The first therapy session felt like walking barefoot on broken glass. I sat across from a stranger with kind eyes and a clipboard, and I didn't know where to start. So I didn't. I cried instead, not the loud, messy kind, but quiet tears that just kept coming. But I went back. Week after week. And somewhere between the silence and the questions I didn't want to answer, I began to hear myself again. Not the old version. Someone new. Someone still broken, but breathing. Going back to work felt surreal. My desk was exactly as I'd left it, like time had stood still there. But I hadn't. I was different, sharper in some ways, worn in others. I no longer smiled just to fill space. I spoke when I meant something. My coworkers noticed, tiptoed around me at first, unsure whether to treat me like glass or stone. But I didn't need either. I just needed space to rebuild, quietly, on my own terms. It started with a late-night search. I was looking for support groups for women like me, the ones who had lost more than they knew how to name. But most of what I found felt clinical, detached, like someone had tried to package grief into tidy bullet points. So I started writing, at first, just for myself. Letters to the daughter I never got to hold, notes about the emptiness, the rage, the moments of stillness that scared me. I signed them with a name that wasn't mine, E.M. Rivers. It felt safer that way. People began to find the blog, slowly at first, then all at once. Women wrote to me, strangers, survivors. They told me their stories, raw, honest, achingly familiar. And I realized something. I wasn't alone, and neither were they. That's when I created the foundation, a place for women like us, not just to grieve, but to rebuild. We offered counseling, community, a language for pain that had gone unspoken too long. It wasn't just about healing anymore. It was about honoring what we'd survived. The foundation grew faster than I ever imagined. What started as a quiet corner of the internet turned into rooms filled with women, their stories echoing mine in different accents, different timelines. And with every workshop, every conversation, I felt my voice return. Steady, clear, rooted. I began speaking at events, sharing my story without flinching, and somehow, I became someone people looked to for light in the dark. Not because I had all the answers, but because I wasn't afraid to say, I've been there too. I never used my real name. Not at first. But E.M. Rivers, that name carried me, protected me, let me speak truths I wasn't ready to own out loud. Still Beating went viral after one of my posts was picked up by a major outlet. Suddenly, my inbox was full. Publishers, interview requests, invitations. But none of that compared to the messages from women who simply said, "Thank you for saying it first." I wasn't who I had been, but I was someone I could be proud of. It had been almost 5 years, long enough that I didn't flinch when his name came up in conversation, long enough that I could drive past the old street without feeling like my chest might collapse. So when I got the invitation to speak at the Women Rising conference, I accepted without hesitation. It was a big deal. National coverage, major donors, a real chance to expand the foundation. I was ready. Or so I thought. Until I saw his name on the attendee list, Daniel Whitaker. At first, I thought it was a mistake. But no, it was him. Same name, same hometown. And then I saw his photo on the speaker roster. He was running some startup now, something vague and failing, from what I could gather. A friend forwarded me his pitch deck. He was desperate for investors, clinging to visibility like it was his last breath. The irony wasn't lost on me. He had run from grief. Now he was chasing relevance. And without knowing it, he was walking straight back into my world. He didn't recognize me at first. Not completely. I saw it in his eyes. That flicker of familiarity he couldn't quite place. Maybe it was the way I carried myself now, straighter, quieter. Or maybe he just didn't expect to find me here. Successful, composed, standing in the center of something I built from ashes. When he finally did realize, he smiled. That same crooked grin he used to use when he wanted to disarm me. And then came the line, "I'm proud of you." As if those words could stitch together what he once shattered. I didn't flinch, just tilted my head, returned the smile. I told him how unexpected it was, how wonderful it would be to have him at our next benefit gala. I even offered him a speaking slot, said we were always looking for stories of transformation. He beamed, ate it up. And I meant every word, except not in the way he thought. I told him there was just one condition, full transparency. I said it sweetly, casually, like it was a simple requirement. He nodded without hesitation. He thought it was a reunion, a second chance. I could see it in the way he lingered when we spoke, the way he laughed too loudly at nothing, like we were just two old friends catching up. But I wasn't interested in closure. I wasn't looking for apologies. I was writing something far more permanent. Every word he spoke, every self-congratulatory anecdote, was a thread in the story I was about to unravel. Not just for me, but for every woman who'd ever been left mid-collapse. I watched him rehearse his speech at the venue, standing under the soft glow of stage lights, unaware of what I'd lined up behind the scenes. He had no idea that his own words, the ones he thought were buried in time, would be the ones to light the fuse. When he looked at me across that empty room, he saw warmth, grace, forgiveness maybe. But what I gave him wasn't mercy. It was a stage, and I was going to let him stand on it, right before the ground gave way. The room was packed. Donors, press, survivors, allies, people who had followed my story for years without knowing it was mine. The stage was set with elegance, candles, soft lighting, framed quotes about resilience. He stood backstage, adjusting his tie, beaming like he belonged there. I could almost admire the confidence, if I didn't know what it was built on. I stepped up to the podium first, welcomed the crowd, thanked them for believing in what we were building, and then I introduced him. "A man who taught me something powerful," I said, letting the silence settle, about grief, silence, and survival. He walked out to polite applause. I stepped back, and as he began to speak, the screen behind him came to life. Line by line, the past began to surface. His words pulled from the messages he thought were forgotten. "You're too broken. This is suffocating. I need to start over, with someone normal." His voice faltered. The audience froze. He turned slowly, glancing at the screen like it had betrayed him. His jaw clenched, fingers twitching at his sides. You could feel the air shift, curiosity giving way to discomfort, then to realization. Whispers rippled through the crowd. People stared. Some leaned in, others looked away. And him? He stood there, exposed under soft lights, drowning in his own cruelty, echoing now through a microphone he couldn't escape. The man who once left without a word now had all eyes on him, and nothing left to say. I stayed seated at the front, still, composed. There was no satisfaction in watching him squirm, not the kind people imagine. What I felt was something quieter, cleaner, like an exhale I'd been holding for years. He cleared his throat, tried to speak again, but the weight of his own words crushed any performance he had rehearsed. This wasn't a takedown, it was a mirror. And for the first time, he had to face it. Not in private, but where everyone could see. When the screen went black, the silence stayed. No applause, no rescue, just the sound of truth settling into the room like dust. I stood then, not rushed, not dramatic, and walked to the microphone. My heels echoed against the floor, calm and steady. I looked out at the sea of faces, then straight at him. I survived, I said, what he couldn't even stand beside. My voice didn't shake. It didn't need to. The truth had already done the heavy lifting. He left me with nothing. Not a child, not a partner, not even an explanation. And in return, I gave him the same. Only this time, I wrapped it in a spotlight and let him feel what I did. The weight of being abandoned, the chill of being unseen, the echo of your own name in a room full of people who finally see you for what you are. I stepped away from the stage, not victorious, but whole. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying the ending. I had written it,